Welcome everyone to episode 41 of Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. I am here with Boopasaurus Rex, it's a Twitter handle anyways. Do you have a preferred name who I
Yeah,
refer
you could
to?
call me Boop. My name's Chris, so a lot of people just went with Boop a lot of the time, and it's funny, like when people introduce me, they'll be like, "Hey, this is Richard. This is Megan, and this is Boop." It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I guess that's a sign.
Yeah. I guess that's who you are. But most well known for TFT commentary, yeah? So
Yeah, and some old school Overwatch.
yeah, exactly. Yes. We'll get into, I guess, a bit of that, as well as we dive kind of into your history in esports, what we like to do here on this podcast first. So, what got you to where you are now?
So what got me to where I am now is Barcraft from back in the day. I think it was like 2016. I had just turned 21, and there was a Barcraft event happening during, I think, BlizzCon, at my local bar. And what was really cool about it, oh, it wouldn't have been BlizzCon because it was on a Sunday. It's weird that I know that, but it was on a Sunday, and I got and full disclosure, I got hammered at like 6 o'clock at night, right? And then I was like looking around and I was like, this is esports, right? And I was like, let's keep doing with this. And I was with someone at the time who was a pretty hardcore gamer. And I was like a really big gamer back in the Sega Genesis day. Like Street Fighter's still like my main title that I'm like best at. But after that, I was like, yo, this could be really cool. And then I went to a couple more bar crafts and I was like, these commentators are really awesome. Like I like what they're doing. Is this something that I could be good at potentially? I was a music major at the time, so I always like performing and I like attention, which is like the perfect combination for a caster, right? And and then eventually Overwatch came out, and my local arena, LAN arena, Clutch Gaming, which was super successful back in the day, was like, they needed casters. And a week earlier, I was at a Hearthstone tournament and I got eliminated literally first out of everybody. And someone didn't show up and they're like, hey, we need a caster. And because I casted that Hearthstone tournament, they introduced me to the Overwatch team, which ended up being Carbon Entertainment, which ended up being Overwatch Contender Season 0, which was the Overwatch League preamble.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that's kind of how I got there.
Dang. All right. So, I mean, kind of a classic story, really, in esports, but a bit more updated for this. I feel like the current generation. I've seen a bit of a split sometimes when I talk to people about. I've talked to some real like OGs who were there like when StarCraft 2 came out. And then I've talked to a lot of people who, yeah, I would say around 2015, 2016, kind of their rival of Overwatch. Talk about their journey there. And granted, because I've talked to some Overwatch people, but just in general, it feels like that was another boost for esports. It felt like that's another kickoff that happened, was that era, and more attention was given to it. So you start off with Overwatch. Did you get into this with thinking that this would become a career, or was this very much just casual, and for how long?
So it was, man, I waffled on the whole, is this a passion or is this a job thing, for a really long time. And I obviously love being in that middle because I was a music major too, right? So it was like, once something that you love becomes your job, there's always like this weird thing that can kind of happen. It's like when you're a waiter at a restaurant, do you eat at that restaurant still? Um, but at first it was like for fun, right? And I think it was just as an excuse to put some time into it and take time away from some other stuff in my life. But after that first Overwatch cast, I was like, I have not felt this because I had admittedly lost a little bit of that music passion because it did become my job. And when I was in high school, it was a much more therapeutic experience for me. And music school was so competitive that like the amount of friends you had was like determined by how good you were
Mm.
at your instrument. And I was a tuba player. And so it's like, this doesn't really, match up. I don't feel like the tuba should be this ridiculous. But, after that, I actually ended up selling my tuba to my professor. And the first time I had felt actual joy in work that I did was during that Overwatch, for that very first Overwatch cast. And I was like, I just don't ever want to stop this. It reminded me of like a teacher high, right? Like
Hmm.
something that just is almost addictive. Um, And then after that first kind of go round, slowly but surely things started like clicking in my mind that, hey, I'm good at this. And at the same time, I was in a sales job. So I was in the entertainment industry. So I was already kind of frequenting a lot of these people. And then after about 6 months or so, I got an established partner, Ham Tornado,
Hmm.
um, who is awesome, who owns a business now, by the way.
Cool.
And I found my partner, and then we kind of sat down and we're like, we're gonna do this. And she was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And so I quit my job, and
Hey.
it ended up working out there for the first couple years, and then yeah, so I think that kind of covers it.
Yeah. I think I followed her around the same time that I followed you, but then, yeah, as you said, I think she was moving away, and then,
Yeah.
congrats on the business. Yeah, awesome. But also what's really cool is that I do think, again, with that kind of era, 2015, 2016, and Overwatch being what really propelled a lot of people into an interest in esports, we also found a lot of pairings. Found a lot of partnerships and put an emphasis on partnerships that I had not really identified, I suppose. In my scene, we had a couple of duos, but then it really was never the duo. You'd go to a tournament and you'd mix and match every single
Yeah.
place. So when you can find that person who you gel with, but then also can become a bit of a business partner is really awesome. When I guess when the life happened, you guys started to move away and move into different things. Did you find it more difficult to really, like, I guess, reach out and do things? You didn't have that support, or you were already kind of in the groove, so you just kind of carried on?
So that's an awesome question, by the way. I've never been asked that before. But it was very hard, I think, at first. So Ham and I were the type of partnership where it was almost a negative because we were never taken separately ever as a pair. She would do other things, but for me, I was definitely, it was Boop and Ham, right? Like it really wasn't, other things. And that was our vibe, and that was cool, and that was great. Right. But once that kind of stopped, I was like, oh, I literally haven't worked with anyone else in a year and a half. And the idea of coming up with that same type of synergy again, right? It was like I divorced someone. Right. And like I needed to and I was comparing it. And it's funny, like this is a funny story. Like Ham lives in Colorado too. So we were really lucky when it came to that. And I like took her to like my doctor appointments because like
Oh,
I needed like second opinions on things. So like I took my husband and then what I called my work wife, because she had like medical experience in the back end,
huh.
and that's how close we were. Like she lived here for all through contenders. I mean, she's still probably one of the best friends I've ever had in my life. And then we got separated. So I got dropped from contenders, and then they kept her on. And this was a moment of what do we do now, right? What is happening? And then she made the decision. I think she probably got COVID like 2 years ago in Germany. Um, and throughout that decision, she had some time to think and was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Right. And she kind of figured out that she was kind of doing it for me. And she was still kind of working, and I was the one that was kind of driving the passion. And that was that was different, for
Yeah.
example, than before. And she kind of took that as a hint of my heart's not in it. I don't want to take a spot that, someone else would absolutely love. And, good luck, Chris, but I think I'm out. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm glad this happened because now I don't have that, like, will she come back? You know? And from that moment on, I was like, okay, I have to work on myself because I had been kind of riding on her coattails at the very beginning of our thing. And then I had been growing. And eventually I was like, I need to make a name for myself in this industry. Right. And something that I noticed was throughout my entire time in Overwatch, and even not less recently in TFT, because TFT casters are quite diverse. I was the only gay person that I talked to.
Hmm.
And that like in that entire time pretty much. I think Ham and I were the first queer duo to be on an Overwatch broadcast. And so, there's a lot of stuff that came with that too. I'm sure we're going to talk about, but that was hard because I didn't even have that either. Like when someone would be like, "Yo, your voice is annoying," right? I couldn't go to Ham and be like, and she couldn't be like, "Yeah, I know." Like she knew, she
Right.
empathized. But I think it ended up being one of the better things because I did end up making a name for myself, not just as a caster, but as a person who's going to advocate and train. And, I'm very proud because a lot of the people that I helped get started are getting signed now to agencies. And, the joke is once you work with me, you'll get your dream job. Hopefully one day that I'll get to be, but, no. And that's what I realized I really enjoyed was helping, right? And if I took myself and my own kind of turf protection out of things, working with anyone was fine, right? And then once I kind of landed on that, it became, hey, we're a partnership. And what I learned from Ham and I is that once we're on screen, we're a duo. We can't leave, right? So we might as well do the best that we can. And that's really, I think, rocketed me up recently, especially in the TFT community.
Oh wow, that was I was there's a lot of like in there, I suppose.
Yeah.
So first off, you said that like you actually got dropped when Ham didn't. So was that also a big, I guess, catalyst for your improvement? Like what was it a combo? Was it really more Ham leaving? Was like because I might imagine that someone when you're partnered and they're like we want that person but not you. I mean, I gotta imagine that
Yeah.
was a bit of a gut punch. But how did you take that?
Um, So I can't specifically say how I was told, but I was also notified in a pretty awful way. I'm just gonna say it, whatever. She told me. The
Ah.
company didn't. So I
Mm,
found out through her, and I didn't know I was officially dropped until the next talent announcement,
mm,
which made me really mad. But also, if I didn't get mad, the best way to motivate me is to be like, I don't think you could do that.
right.
Right. And then I'm like, well, screw you. Let me see. I love being the underdog. Right. And, honestly, I was on Contenders for 3 seasons, and I think I kind of coasted that last season, to be honest with you. I was super, mentally drained. There was a lot of controversy when it came to Ham and I as like,
Uh,
the type of casting that we were doing because it wasn't necessarily, I think, what Contenders wanted. But what's really funny is that now everyone's casting like we were, 3 years ago. It just wasn't. We just missed the timing. I think the timing wasn't there.
oh,
But
could you explain a little bit about what you think that was, what they wanted, and what it is now?
so we were always told pretty much to actually take our individuality away was almost a lot of our feedback was to be more normal, I guess, like more traditional when it came to casting because Ham and I are funny. I'm just gonna put that out there, right? Ham and I were really funny, and we would joke and we would like get on each other, and it's really funny because a lot of the casters now are a lot looser and a lot better at that banter and conversation, whereas that was what we were best at. But a lot of people were like, "We'll never put you on a final because you're not you know, you're not representing what we think we want right now." And I think at the beginning stages of Overwatch, they were really kind of going for that clean, sterile, right kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. And I totally get it. Like that's a direction you can go. But I think they missed a little authenticity there, to be completely honest. And then we, I think suffered from that. And we did get, there's a lot of other stuff that happened too, on the back end. But in terms of what I think we brought to the table, which was, hey, come watch this game with us and enjoy yourself, right? We're going to teach you, but you're also going to have fun, right? Kobe from League of Legends is kind of how we modeled all of that. And it's really funny because while our fans weren't loud, we had a lot. And I wish I was confident enough in myself to kind of be like, no, stop telling me to sound less gay. Right. That was feedback that I got, right? Was your voice is too gay to be a commentator.
Huh.
And that was feedback I got from like 4 people.
Okay.
Like it was, and I literally went and took voice lessons to
Mm-hmm.
sound more masculine. And that was a moment where I was like, this is not okay. Right. I'm like literally changing myself because of, someone's opinion. And, while I think there might have been some, health things, I wasn't talking very healthily at the time, but still I knew kind of what it was. And that was coming from, other talent, other higher ups there. And, I think if the environment was a little different too, Ham and I probably would have been a lot more successful. But there's also some internal stuff in terms of relationships that I think affected us a little bit. But at the end of the day, I do think that casting, especially in Overwatch, has come away from the sterility and has been a lot more personality driven since, for example, like Lemon and Lake Day, who I think are the currently the best casters. My favorite casters in Overwatch. I like them all, but there's just they give that little extra spirit, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed both of them and I really enjoyed it. We're both Leg Day is very funny, like cheery guy, and
I
then
wish I had that voice, man. How
yeah,
unfair is
that
it to
too.
have that
Yeah,
voice in
yeah,
broadcast, right?
exactly. And then the Kiwi is just she has like a drive that is just I think unparalleled so far.
She makes me tired, like, observing what she does. You know, like, I'm a grinder, but, like, not like, she's a like, she's always going. It's
Yeah,
mad respect to her.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think that's what I was going to guess. Honestly, was you were going to talk about the beginnings of Overwatch being a bit sterile. It just was very much trying to go for this NFL clean look, which a lot of time also included white guys.
Mhm.
And they were aware that they needed some representation, but they never really got super far on that subject. But it has gotten better. I absolutely agree. I think that everyone's been allowed to like spread their wings a little and actually
Thank
show off
goodness,
their
yeah.
personality. And it just they could only keep such a tight rein anyways, it felt like for their attempts, even if they still thought it was the best thing to do. I really wonder how long they could have continued with it. But
Mhm.
glad to see that you guys, like, you specifically found the confidence to be like, wait a minute, hold on, like, I would have done better if it was different timing. Because I think it'd be very easy just to be like, yeah, I guess I'm just not cut out for it. This is wrong voice, wrong appearance. I'm far behind or far ahead of the times, rather, maybe in 10 years, something
Yeah.
like that. But it seems like you've adapted very well.
Well, something I say a lot, and this is something I say to a lot of people that I mentor in this space, is that there are people who are shields and there are people who are spears, right? People who are shields will block you from what's going on behind you, right? But that's about it. They might not help, but they'll lead you through. I like to say that I'm a spear, right? Where I'm like going to be like, stick it to the man, right? And no one's hired you before. Let me pay you for this, and
Wow.
then and be what I want the esports industry to be because I didn't get to experience that. Right. And, there's something out there. It's really funny because I was also thinking about the fact that other gay people in the industry that I've met, I've been weirdly competitive with. And I've always wondered why.
Hmm.
Right. And I think it's just because, we're just so used to being the one gay person
Oh,
or
yeah,
the
yeah.
one girl on a broadcast. Right. And, eventually I was like, we got to stop that. And so, I've given up opportunities to give other people opportunities. And I wish that that could happen more because I got the experience. I got flown out. I went to LA. I own my own company like now, and I did my thing. And now it's time for me to pass that on and hopefully help someone else who might be a little Chris, who might think that their voice might not be good enough, see someone like me successful in the industry and doing things and talking to people and being accepted. And now that's what my driving force is. I wish I felt like that 5 years ago.
Right.
Right. But the second I hit 30, I was like, oh man, I'm old. And it's like I got to stop caring about this, and it still hurts when I read things online and of course, there's the odd comment on Twitch chat that will catch your eyes sometimes when you're VOD reviewing, but at the end of the day, I want to be able to talk the talk and walk that walk. And without that experience at the beginning of Overwatch to physically be alone and have no support and no investment really from anyone other than me and my partner, other than the investment of opportunity that they gave us, which of course I'm super appreciative of, there were definitely some failures I think that could have really helped not just me and Ham, but other people like us. Not just in Overwatch, but just in general across the space.
I think I've talked to enough casters that it's pretty much agreed upon that there's a moment in every caster's life where they feel like they've hit a certain rock bottom. They've been denied the big opportunity, or they thought that they deserved something else, and you either kind of come out of that very bitter and sad and just make things worse for yourself, because you also have examples of people like imploding, right? When they don't
Yeah,
get something, they have a bit of a tantrum, and or you get through it like an adult, no matter how long it takes, and then you come out the other end and you're like, okay, I cared way too much about that thing. Make sure I have this other thing that I can focus on, or like clearly
exactly.
I had the wrong attitude. Like there was something with me. Sometimes it is an intrinsic, looking that's necessary. You need to look at yourself and be like, what was I missing? And sometimes you eventually admit that it's external. You say like, yeah, I guess, the company is the one that messed up. I think I did deserve that and whatever you want to do, but
Yeah.
no matter what, you don't go ballistic. I think
Yeah,
that's
exactly. I've seen some meltdowns for some
yeah.
very small opportunities on Twitter, right? I'll never forget. One of my favorite things is like watching or, like, those discords with like all new casters and stuff, and just seeing how every week someone just destroys their career for like no reason. Right. And it's like, what are you doing, guys? Why are you doing this? And they'll never blame themselves for that.
Right.
Right. They'll be like, oh, it's this person did it, or oh, I thought I was a DM, or why did you tell them? But in esports, this is advice, whatever, just always assume that you're typing in public. Right.
Mm.
Number two, if the tweet feels good to tweet, probably don't tweet it out. And three is one of my biggest pieces of advice that I don't listen to. But at the end of the day, it's you can only control so much, right? And I
Right.
do think there were things I did wrong. There were definitely things I did wrong during that early casting time that I wish I had some time. And what's really sucked about it is I really peaked in my skill once I got dropped. I was like so excited to show them what I had brought to the table. And
Oh.
again, timing just got me. But like you said, you can either let that bring you down. I stewed for about a month, and then finally I was like, something happened. It's like this weird veil that like gets released. I did my little, mourning, and then, I went right back onto the grind because it's esports.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a bit what it is. Actually, a bit of a grievance process. You have to accept it eventually and move on, but there's
Yeah,
the
you got
whole
to go through all five
stages.
stages.
Exactly, yeah. It's going to happen. And how you work through it and who you are beyond it was going to be a lot more important. And I can actually say that there's been examples of people who probably should have gotten, a bit of a slap, myself included, for how they took things. But because, me, them, whatever, they didn't go ballistic on like Twitter or social media. They kind of kept it mostly to themselves. Maybe a couple of Twitch streams that no one watched. They didn't end up getting punished for it necessarily, but maybe you should have, because it is dangerous. It's dangerous. You need to be very
Yeah.
careful with how you approach these things. And I've seen some
Hmm.
examples recently with the Dota stuff. Of someone taking it gracefully, and then I've seen some not graceful
Yeah.
takes on it.
Well, and the hardest thing about our industry is that we're all competing with our friends
Yeah.
too. So sometimes it feels like that they're like they get an opportunity and it's like they personally took that away from me, and which is like a weird thing that happens. But what I say is collaboration and competition could exist at the same time, and this is where being a tuba player actually helped. There's always only one tuba.
Oh.
Like in an orchestra, like, max in a band, there's four, right? So like I've been denied for a lot of gigs. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, oh, good for you. You got the gig. You're better than me. Or, hey, good for you. You must have had a really great audition. I'm never like, you suck. I should have been there, because, everyone has their thing, unless it's like egregious, which sometimes it is.
Right.
But even then, how you handle yourself, like I've hired casters because they've been graceful in defeat
Mm.
on the previous opportunity, and been like, I sense some maturity and growth here, and I think in 3 months you're going to be ready, right? And then let's get you that opportunity. And so I hope to see more of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really important. How people, yeah, handle their defeat, and they should be given second chances and third chances
Hmm.
and all that good stuff. But so we talked about your Overwatch stints and difficulties there. Continue on with the esports story, I suppose. What happened after that?
Yeah, so after that, I was pretty bummed, and then I was like looking for partners in Overwatch, and then finally I was like, maybe I should try a different game. Um, and And I also kind of realized that maybe the target audience of Overwatch wasn't who I was actually talking to, in terms of who might like me the most, right? And there's a little bit of strategy there, as well. And then TFT came out. And TFT is not normally a game I would play. Like the only real card game I ever played was Hearthstone, and I don't know what happened, because the first game of TFT I played, I was like, "This is drugs, and I need to keep playing." I love this game. And then I got onto a podcast with Blevins, who's another awesome person in the industry, and through that, I got into the TFT community, and then Wisdom Gaming picked me up for Fight Night and some other content. And I have to say, of all the complaints I might have with some of my other things, like I want to run my company like Wisdom. They're so diverse. I've not ever felt this supported in a company before, not even just in esports, but just like in general at work. Right? Like I know that when I'm going in there, that they have my best interest at heart, right? Which I can't actually say for every game I've ever casted, right? Um, and they're just amazing, and they have really diverse casters, um, uh, and it's just been awesome to work there. And the TFT community um, is a little older. It's weird. It's actually really young or old. Like the 25 to 27-year-old doesn't really exist, but like there are a lot of like under 18s and a lot of people over 30 who play. And it's funny because like they'll be like, I have to talk to my wife, and I'm just like, that's not a thing I ever would hear in Overwatch, right? Um, and so I got through that. And then once I, through wisdom, slowly but surely, through hard work. And this is another cool part about it is before, I would always be like, oh, I got this gig because ham, or I got this gig because of something else. With this, I got it because I worked my ass off. And that's what I'm like really proud about. And I've reached levels that I never reached with Overwatch, for example. I did a Riot Sanction event not too long ago. And it's just really cool because the dichotomy of anxious, depressed, I'll be whoever you want to be, Chris, back in 25 years old, to like being rewarded for being me is just so cool. And I have to thank everyone at Wisdom for that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Oh, awesome. And your own company? You're
Oh yes, I should probably talk about that too. Um, So I run Monkey Bubble, and we are a production company based out of Europe, actually. So I had my 1 year anniversary yesterday, January 6th. And what's been really cool is through that year, we did a LAN at the Golden One Center in San Francisco. We're bidding on a bunch of really cool stuff. And I'm just really proud because we're known as like an Overwatch company. We run Overwatch contenders, pretty much all a tier 2 Overwatch for Blizzard, but we're doing lands now. We're doing Rocket League. We're, partnering with colleges. It's everything that I wanted it to be, if that makes sense. And again, I have to thank everyone, all my colleagues at Monkey Bubble, because they're letting me be me, right? I'm selling like I want to sell, like, and they're supportive of that. They might, rib me every once in a while because they're all European and I don't get their jokes. But you know how many times I've said a joke to silence?
yes, yeah,
Like, is it me? Am I not funny?
yeah.
Um, but they've and we've gotten to grow because we're all supporting each other, and that's awesome. And I'm so scared that I'm not walking the walk, right? That I'm only talking about these things, and I'm happy that through my leadership, we've been able to come upon some really cool opportunities too.
I couldn't help but think of one very specific Europe versus America like joke where I just was left hanging because I as an experience these Europeans as a whole, honestly, guys, like you just there's a specifically like Germans will have a very different humor and you like have to realize that, but
Yeah, I think most of my staff is Dutch.
oh, okay.
So they're also honest, which 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 hurts me sometimes, but it's great for work.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the Dutch guy in Ted Lasso is always like saying truth bombs. It's really funny. But I'll never forget one day where I was like, yeah, it was like my second day at work, and I was like, I can't wait till I can get y'all like health insurance. And they're like, Chris, um, we all have health insurance
Oh,
because we're in Europe. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the only one that needs health
yep.
insurance here. But other than some cultural combativeness, it's awesome. We got people in Australia, we got people in the Netherlands and Germany, and we're really starting to grow. I'm actually kind of like freaked out by February and March, like looking at that schedule, my eyes get really wide, right? And that's a good thing. It's good busy.
Yeah, nice. Well, I don't want to skip over TFT, but I do want to talk a lot about the company and whatnot. But just to touch on your TFT career, yeah, how has it been getting into that community? So it felt from an outside perspective, I've watched a little because I've interviewed other people who do TFT, but I actually never even tried it. But it seems like a bit of a smaller community, but it still has a ton of events. I feel like there's constantly retweets of tournaments happening for everyone that I watch. Was it an easy process? Do you consider it a small community or a large one?
I It's like a very loud small community, right?
Okay.
It's kind of like how I view Denver as like an esports community. There's a weird amount of people from Colorado in esports. Like Monte Cristo, for example, is from Colorado. Went to school here, and so it's kind of like that where we have a much bigger footprint in the industry than you would expect. It is like the eighth most popular game on Twitch right now. It's pretty crazy what's happening because TFT is like a melting pot of players. It's everyone's game that they play when they're tired of their original game, is what is
Yeah.
what I've noticed, right? But it's also like the most amazing background noise in terms of Twitch streaming. Like I put it right up there with GDQ in terms of like the best second monitor Twitch experience you can get, because and the streamers are super interactive with their fans, and I think that's a big reason why our community has been so passionate. Because one, I have to say it again, wisdom has been a driving force in a lot of that stuff. I think probably 60 to 70% of the content you see is probably going to be from them, even if the labels might be different. And then on the secondary end, everyone's really nice. It's so weird coming from some other communities where like I remember watching a stream and they were watching their performance and I casted, and then they're like, oh, I don't agree with that caster, but he got like his hat. And it was like, that secondary comment never happened 5 years ago, right? And I'm just happy that, it's happening. But everyone's really nice. Everyone's open. And, when things have happened in the TFT community that are negative, people have apologized and learned and grown. I really like it. It is small-ish, but I think it's going to continue to grow. And getting into it is pretty easy. You just got to type in chat, and people will end up just talking to you because everyone types in chat for a TFT because everyone thinks they're the best TFT player ever.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
But to get into casting, it's a lot harder though,
Right.
because it is a smaller community, and esports is all about timing meets preparation, right? I mean, I got my start because someone didn't show up, right? And so same thing with TFT. It's like you just got to be ready for when that moment calls. But what's actually been really crazy is everyone who has casted TFT has gotten some things with Wild Rift, have gotten some things with all of like the secondary league experiences, and
Hmm.
that seems like a really cool funnel as well. And I definitely see more of that happening.
Interesting. So I was gonna ask a question and then I was like a new question popped in my brain. Do you consider? I guess I'll start with my first comment. I do think it's a melting pot of games because it seems like it was one of those new genres. So
Hmm.
Rocket League people have told me like similar things that because it was a new genre, like there was no one who had experienced casting Rocket League that you could be from any other esport and just be like, this is a cool game, I'm gonna try casting, and people be like, wow, awesome. And there wasn't that entrenched like
Hmm.
community feeling that you had to be an OG from the previous set of games and whatnot. Do you think auto chess is the genre, right? Kind of similar deal? Because I actually don't even remember the order of what released, to be
It
honest.
was
So,
auto chest and then underlords and then TFT,
okay.
which was pretty much it. But yeah, I do, only because it's like slots. And there's like something like inherently addictive about it. Like this is bad. Like when I first played TFT, there was like this weird like tingle on the back of my like neck where I matched my three people and I was like, oh no. Like, when you're falling into an addiction, right?
Oh, yeah.
That like I saw it happening in real time when it comes to TFT. And I think the genre is just inherently addictive because some of the best games on Steam, one of the best game, Teamfight Manager on Steam right now is an auto battler. Loop Hero,
Oh.
who's nominated for most innovative gameplay, is a roguelike auto battler. And so it's actually getting into some other genres, which are really cool. But TFT is the standard, in my opinion. Like TFT is the best version of it. It's the prettiest version of it. It's the most well-developed version of it. And I think it's going to keep going because the developer support for TFT, they're too nice to us. Like they're too like they might be too communicative to us and their changes. But it's awesome because again, coming from Overwatch, it was kind of different, right? The
Mm.
team didn't announce anything until they had something, whereas in TFT it was like, hey, we're working on these things. We know this is a problem, and these are the things we're working on. So it's been an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, that's time to get into the Riot versus Blizzard conversation. That's what it popped in my brain. We were talking about, being a Riot child, if you will. Yeah, start things off. Blizzard across the board. I think all of their esports have a grudge, if not straight up hate their papa. Overwatch still gets the most attention, but even they aren't getting very a lot of communication or a lot of, it feels like,
I
positive
mean,
reinforcement, if you will.
they've been like that for what, 15 years, right? Like what is Blizzard is really good at releasing good games and then letting them stall out, kind of, is
Pretty
kind of how I
much.
feel sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I would say that so they were never the best. I would say that they were never the best. I would say that, but I think they were better. For
Hmm.
StarCraft specifically, for me, there was clearly very passionate people who wanted to talk all the time. They wanted to see StarCraft grow, and they fought for it every single time. And that included occasionally, fighting for just communication. Now
Hmm.
anyways. But it's come to the conclusion that Blizzard has not really been the forefront of esports like they wanted to be, especially when Overwatch came out, even though that's very big and I'm not knocking it in this specific podcast. But the yeah, it's not. Riot really has pushed to the forefront as to like what you should be emulating when you're thinking about a humongous publisher with a lot of money and who wants to create a game, because so far they've had all those hits similar to what Blizzard did with just video games 10-15 years ago, is where Riot is right now. It feels like for esports, and they're not perfect. Before anyone comes in and is like, well, they did the stupid thing at this tournament recently, it's like, of course there's no perfect, but
Yeah.
they're doing really well. How do you feel being a Riot child? Again, I'm going to use this terminology, Riot child, but one of the lesser seen ones, right? Because a lot more attention is on League of Legends and Valorant.
Hmm. Excuse me. So I knew kind of Blizzard shtick, like while I was kind of there, right? I knew their patches were slow. I knew some of the communication could be bad, but their games are always good, right? And Overwatch had the representation that I liked. The fact that their main character was gay, and that's who they released at BlizzCon as a gay man was like a huge like. I couldn't tell you how important that was for me in terms of my forming my gaming kind of ideals,
Hmm.
right? And like being like, oh, this is what representation, you know what I mean? Like I watched To All the Boys I've Loved Before, right? And I don't like rom-coms, but I'm half Asian, and I was like, wait a second, this is the first time I'm seeing a half Asian family like
Hmm.
on in a movie, and this is awesome, right? Because they were eating like hot dogs with rice or something like that, and I was like, I ate that. Right?
Okay.
But and so that was something with Blizzard that I really, really liked, that at the time, I don't feel like in like 2015, 2016, Riot really was there yet.
Right.
And I don't really think Riot hit that peak until the 10-year anniversary video. Once Riot had the 10-year anniversary video, it was like, oh, they've been biding their time for like 5 years to release all this stuff. And Blizzard never reacted. And in terms of business, I was always a little confused by that. And then once they were like, hey, we've got indie games coming up, we've got all this stuff, it's hard when someone's like, hey, what should I look at in terms of how to be successful in this industry? If you're not saying Riot Games, they're creating an entire Marvel universe pretty much right
Yeah.
now, right? Successfully. Arcane is one of the best shows I've watched. Like, it doesn't even have to be like, of any show. It's one of the best shows I've watched. And being, part of the Riot side is really nice because I know there's going to be events, there's going to be support, and there's going to be, other things. And, Blizzard has those things and they want to do those things. They're going through some stuff right now. Um, that that might be a little distracting. But Blizzard had it in 2015, 2016, right? I think if once it was kind of like Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, StarCraft were all still making a ton of money,
Hmm.
right? Because Heroes of the Storm was super popular for a good amount of time. It was actually my first esporting like live event was Heroes of the Storm with Gillyweed, who is another one of my inspirations.
Yeah.
Who is my boss now, which is so crazy. Uh,
She's
but
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll never forget her Sonya scream, legendary. But being on that side, it's like I feel like there's just I'm on the ride still. Like I'm on the tram and we're still going. Whereas, Blizzard's still making a bunch of stops along the way, and they might get, some time there, but it's hard for me to see the magic of 2015 and 2016, before Don't You All Have Phones, come back, because there's a point where Hearthstone was the number one game in the world in terms of making
Yeah.
money, right? And then, that ended up falling off. Overwatch ended up falling off, and it just doesn't. They might have things in the back end. And as someone who, I work with Blizzard when it comes to contenders and stuff like that, I want to be honest. And my feedback is always like, authenticity is key. And that's why I think the tier 2 community, like with Lemon and Leg, have been so successful in that space, is because they represent that community and they're finally investing in it. So I see a little glimmer of hope there. when it comes to the future, but everything's on pause until Overwatch 2, right? It's it's
Mm,
tough, man. It's just like they'll make a good decision, and then sometimes they'll follow it up, and then sometimes they won't, and then Riot will be like, "Hey, we got a 7th game that we're releasing,"
yeah.
and by the way, it's good. And so it's just tough not to compare. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. It's tough not they are the biggest influences, I think, because you talk about Valve and it's very, very weird and different with Valve, who I guess would be the other humongous
Mhm.
force in esports. But yeah, I never really kind of put it down to this, but you're right. So when you were talking about the 10th year anniversary video, it took me a while to connect the dots. That was the one where they announced they're going to do like a fighting game and Valorant
Yep.
and all that. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, 2015, it really was, I think, one of the last super, super optimistic years for Blizzard as a whole, not just a StarCraft fan, but as a general Blizzard fan, because that
Well,
was,
that BlizzCon was awesome.
yeah,
It
it
was
was, yeah,
the BlizzCon that Overwatch got announced, and you could
yeah.
buy the Origins, thing, and I bought it on the floor, and I remember, like, that particular BlizzCon to this day is my favorite.
It was a cool. The fact that they hit it is still actually, I feel like, a marketing marvel or something. You know, like it's so impossible to hide something as big as that. But they did it, I guess, kind of under the guise of like a failed MMO, right? So it was a weird trickery. But that was awesome seeing that come on all the video monitors. And then we also had Legacy of the Void for us StarCraft people coming out. So there's still a lot of hope in that. But I'm even thinking about the amount of people that I knew were still at Blizzard who, and I'm not saying people aren't passionate nowadays. I'm sure they still hire very good people at Blizzard, but then the actual like means to do their work, I think, is what's not
Yeah.
there. But from what I recall, is there's so much more, like there's passion, there's a real drive to improve in multiple areas, not just making video games, but making esports was obviously something that was on the horizon. They wanted to be the esports people, and then actually diversity was also still really becoming more and more critical. I had more conversations kind of around that era with people who are like, how can we bring women into the fold? You know, how can we represent better and whatnot? And that's when, yeah, Overwatch came out and it had this nice draw to it that CSGO is never going to have, which
Yep.
is that you can play a woman. You can play like many things, really.
Yeah.
Anything that you want, really. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of representation, and that was the first, I think, big video game esport that had a lot of women in it. There were
Yeah.
people talking online that were like, "Yeah, I hear more women speak," and they're still not hearing all of them because still like over 50% are probably just not going to use mics.
Yeah.
But it was there. But
Overwatch
then,
has a super high, female player
yeah,
base as well.
yeah. But then Valorant also did kind of the same thing, and you could see
Mhm.
why it really does work. I mean, I would much rather be like, Sky is awesome, she's Australian, she's buff, I'm gonna play her, than be like, this
Yeah.
terrorist looks cool. It's obvious
I
to me.
actually think being a terrorist actually kept me from playing that game. So I grew up in
Well,
like a super army household, right?
oh
I
god,
I broke out of the way, but like I don't think my dad would have appreciated it at the time. But you're totally right because like Apex I think is another really great example of good diversity. And Overwatch like they had everything. And I think that's why people get a little frustrated is because they had the foundation.
yeah,
Like they could have done it. And then they made some interesting decisions. The Pride icon this last time wasn't even called Pride; it was just Rainbow, which really made me mad. And so like your main character is gay, right? Like the person on the box is gay. But like but it's cool to see because I think now because how popular Apex, how popular Rainbow Six has gotten because they've started to do these
yeah,
things. Everyone's going to have to do it that way, in my opinion, and I think that's a good thing. And hopefully that elevates Blizzard and Overwatch because Overwatch is kind of everything right now for them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
until they release, apparently they're working on a new title or something called Diablo. But the but and that's supposed to have some PvP elements, but you never
Yeah.
know. But yeah,
Yeah, it's the future for Riot seems brighter when it comes to esports. They just have been knocking out of the park in many degrees. But then it sounds like in general you're just very happy to be along for that particular train ride, being on Riot expressways, I suppose. Because sometimes I guess specifically, yes, Blizzard. I'll talk to other forgotten esports like Hearthstone. Poor Hearthstone. Yeah, biggest game, and then they pushed them over to YouTube with absolutely no support whatsoever, and then they're like,
Mm.
sorry, forgot about you guys, and it's just so
Actually,
weird.
the biggest game in the world for 2 years. It's
So
actually
weird.
crazy how much money that game made.
Yeah, and then the esport I could only figure was worth it as far as to how much publicity and marketing you could get for every single expansion pack, but they were like, whoops, we forgot about you. Sorry.
Yeah, and they were doing like super innovative events in Hearthstone. I remember they rented out Latte World in South Korea once.
Oh yeah.
Like they were doing like theme parks and getting like more like, and that's what I view as like city-based type of experiences. Like if you go to Chicago and you like somehow get an event next to the Blob, that's going to be awesome instead of just having the same skin for every state, right? But yeah, it's just when I look at Hearthstone, it's hard not to get a little disappointed because they
Oh.
had it again. They had it all under control. It was paying for everything else, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually you just had to spend thousands of dollars to keep playing, and it kind of just ended up doing it to itself.
Kind of, yeah, I guess there is that element
I
to
don't
it.
think TFT is as popular if Hearthstone doesn't fall off exactly when it does, because there's a ton of Hearthstone crossovers and a TFT, like Hafu, for example, and
Oh,
Dog.
okay, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. There was also a pro league at Lottie World, by the way, back in the day, StarCraft. So
I
I was
love Left the
there.
World.
It was
Oh,
fun. It was fun.
the raccoon. I had
I,
that was my like childhood. My mom's Korean, and I went there when I was like 5 or 6,
okay.
and I had it with me for like years. It was the last
Gotcha.
stuffy that I had.
So we went in October, so like it was Halloween themed, and they had this what is it called? A parade. There we go. A parade
Uh-huh.
go around, and it was like a Disney parade, except it was with the raccoon characters. And all I can remember is that they were weirdly like kind of sexualized. Like the woman raccoon was just like I was just
She's got boobs.
uncomfortable. I'm very
Yeah, she's
uncomfortable.
got
I
boobs.
never and they come around and they play this really like hyper intensive song that would just be an earworm for you, and they'd have like these dancing like furries, and I'd be like, I'm okay. I'm gonna watch
You know what?
StarCraft now.
I guarantee someone discovered something that day about themselves.
Absolutely,
If it
100%.
wasn't you, someone else definitely did.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's an interesting point that Hearthstone if it fallen off. You're right about the crossover of the bigger streamers, which can always be also an interesting effect to an esport that's of a certain size. Like
Mhm.
does it actually really help you guys that Hafu plays TFT?
That is a very good question. And I think every person who's involved in TFT esports should think about this,
Right.
because we're one of the esports where I think we're going to have to co-stream. Like
Mm.
there's no way that you run a TFT event without co-streaming, in my opinion. And as a broadcaster, co-streaming can be a little scary sometimes, right? Because if they're drawing 100,000 people, right, and the mainstream is drawing like 500, right? Why would they pay me for the next one? That's something I'm worried about sometimes. But I think the whole holistic approach is the best way. But when it comes to things like Hafu, is our statistics bloated because the top streamers play TFT 2 days a week, right? What are these real numbers? Because when K3 Soji, for example, and Hafu aren't streaming, what's it gonna be? And I remember talking like 2.5 years ago, being like, I hope Riot supports the mid-tier streamers, right? Because they're the ones that are going to end up growing and being our people. And they ended up doing it. So I think it'll be fine. But we're going to have to talk about the whole co-streaming thing at some point, especially if Riot puts a nix to it or something. I don't know what their plans are. But co-streaming is going to be a huge debate here. And like, that'll probably be the thing that we talk about for the next year or so.
Right. I agree. Co-streaming is a hot topic, it feels like right now. And it's
Hmm.
a hotter topic when it's actively happening, so we don't have a big tournament with co-streaming, so there's not much
Yeah.
conversation right now. But I was definitely paying attention to people who had their strong opinions on the matter when Valorant first started doing it, and then the controversy when they partnered people for co-streaming, and then those people didn't actually watch the tournaments. But it's a whole new thing. It's actually
Hmm.
legitimate question for not just the companies that make these games and actually support them, but also for any tournament organizer, third party, or else why they do you co-stream? Is it actually beneficial? And I've read the negatives and positives, so I don't know where you lie. Do you think it is a necessary evil? Is it evil? Is it just pure good? What?
So this is one of those things that like on the surface level, it makes complete sense to do, right?
Right?
But as I have like the unique aspect of also being a TO,
Mm-hmm.
right, at my job, which is I get really scared when people I don't know are talking about my product. right? Like, I don't want, the streamer to watch my tournament and then just shit talk someone like on that stream the whole time, right? Because that was a little bit of a controversy with a league player a little while ago where he was just so negative, but he had 10,000 people watching. It was
Oh,
more than the main stream, right? And that's where my like itchiness comes from is how much creative freedom are you going to give the streamer versus driving things to your main IP because the streamer will be getting the sponsors. The streamer will be getting these things. Your main IP might not. And so if you're a business, it probably makes more sense to stop co-streaming, but I don't think you can.
right.
I think co-streaming is awesome. I think I love watching it. And I wouldn't call it evil, but it's definitely like a necessary, I think, thing to think about because access is what people want in this world right now, especially with COVID. We just want access to people, right? And the co-streaming is a really great way to learn and be a part of a community. It's just they have to decide how the co-stream and the mainstream interact with each other because I have seen co-stream siphon a lot of viewers.
Hmm.
Even just like heuristically, when like XQC would stream while we were doing contenders,
Yeah.
we'd have a marked lower amount of people watching contenders, right? So it's what is the most important for them? Are the streamers bringing in that much money? I don't know those numbers, but this is the debate, friends. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not as easy as I think people want to make it.
Right. It's a necessary complication, is how I would put
Yeah.
it. There's positives, there's negatives, there's good runs and bad runs, and I do remember that time, by the way, when the public, the community in Overwatch actually made a thread, and it was a very contested, controversial thread. But they were like, "Do you think these guys should be streaming while Overwatch is on?" And this wasn't even for tier two, which I would understand is potentially taking away 75% of viewers. Even this was for like the main league. And I was like, if your main league has to worry about the guy streaming his pugs, then it's not great. Like,
Maybe we're not talking about the real solution potential here, right? Because like the solution is in a perfect world, streamers will get a cut of whatever they bring to the table. They give the producer or TO a certain amount because they help them with assets or something. But it's new. No one knows what those
yeah,
numbers are. What is a fair number? Is it 60-40? Is it 50-50? Like who's doing the most work? Is the TO doing the most work because they're running the tournament and just giving the stream to the streamer, right? Like there's so many business questions involved in this that just make me feel gross, but also make sense,
It-
right? Right?
yeah,
As a
yeah,
consumer, I want co-streams on everything,
right, yeah,
right?
and
But
not as a consumer too, but I think of the like tier two community. I can't think of a better word for that, but I'm talking about like the streamers and their day to day job is streaming, not doing the casting, or even casters who aren't going to be participating in every single live event. Like I think we would also want co streams. It would be, I think, easy content. For us, but we're not supposed to do it right now. But it's kind of a similar question to when we see all these sponsorships for the big streamers, right? Like who helped who more? Did Nakara Blade Point help Shroud, or did Shroud help Nakara Blade Point? Probably
yeah,
Shroud helped the
yeah.
video game, and that's why he got paid an enormous amount of money to play it. But I'm sure there's other more contested, questionable ones amongst the mid tier streamers, and now we're asking the same thing for
Yeah.
co-streaming.
And,
But
and we have to have the conversation. And the hard part is like in esports, I feel like you have to own a side, right? You either all in or all out. There's no like, let me just call, right? Or I'm just gonna check real quick, right? Let me just wait to see. And I think the nuance can get lost on this conversation because the business interest is important. It is important for our industry. If they lose interest in running tournaments, we just don't have tournaments anymore, right?
right.
And all of a sudden, we're depending on streamers to run tournaments, right? And
It goes
or
full circle.
something,
It goes
right?
back to like
And
1998, like your
exactly.
middle lands.
What I think will happen is, and this is all a theory. I think that most productions will probably go to independent studios in the future, and then Riot will just decide uh, what they want for tournament by tournament, and then after they get like the stats and stuff like that, they'll probably make a bigger decision
Mm,
because they've been known to change their position on things like with crypto, for example. So they what they might think now might not be what they think in a year.
true. True. But I want to get into a little bit of you being now on the more business side, behind the scenes side. But we have so little time in the podcast. So bad. But you transition into this period, to this role that's more behind the scenes, and you get to see what all of those people's decisions were when you were a caster. How did that transition go? Were you excited? I know you talked a lot about wanting to give people opportunities, and that's awesome. But I mean, just as like the bureaucracy, the actual like minute details of being an organizer.
I was probably one of the most prepared, and I'm going to be a little cocky here, the most prepared to make that transition. I'm a pretty strong networker just in general. Sales is my background. So talking, I love talking to people. I had the flu over the last like week and a half, and I literally said the words, "I don't want to talk." And my company was like, "What? What is happening? You must be real sick." And so going into it was a little easy. I had a little bit of talent management experience at Elo Hell for about 6 months. And that is probably what prepared me for the industry the most, because what that did was people would get mad, man, about just anything. And I realized it was because no one was telling them anything,
Yeah.
right? So they had this anger, right, that they had to attach to something. And I was like, you know what? I'd rather them just all get mad at me so they can work, with each other and, collaborate with each other, right? And so, and if they're upset at me, then we can engage in conversation, we can mentor, and we can do all that stuff. And so my goal going into Monkey Bubble was to be just that, right? I finally got to use my teaching degree, right? I finally, matured enough to run my own company. I was very confident that I was going to be able to do it, and I had the skills to be successful. It was pretty hard early on. There was the culture shock was actually a little bit harder than I had anticipated it to be. I thought, again, I was a lot funnier than they thought I was. But um, at the end of the day, the transition was pretty smooth. And I think I'm privileged to be able to say that because of who I am, where I live, and the area that I am in my life. But going into the business side, what I did see was when people complain about diversity, when people complain about sexism, when people complain about racism, they are not lying,
Mm.
right? What I saw, like as a talent manager, like I remember I did a little thing with one of my clients once where I staffed the entire tournament with women. It wasn't like an all women's tournament, right? It was just I happened to staff with people who identified as being women, right? And they came back at me and they were like, "This girl's voice is too shrill." And I was like, "This is not okay." Right? Like, and then I was actually working with a company that says that they're for women in gaming. And they complained about this person not having enough Twitter followers.
Mm.
And I was like, "But how aren't you supposed?" You know what I mean? So even with people with vested interest in moving these things along, we're still not doing it. Right. And so basically what I did was I raised our prices. All of our casters get paid fairly. They probably get paid more with us. Other places we lose opportunities because of that, unfortunately. But I'm not going to budge on that. And this goes back to what you said because of my background and the skills that I came in. I can go into these negotiations being like, no, this is why this tier 2 caster should be, $575, right? This is what you're getting for $575. And that is where a lot of people I think are missing in esports. It's let me tell you why these numbers exist, right? We're not literally just imagining them
Yeah.
in word clouds and giving them to you. This is why, 4 hours of work on camera is really like 8 hours of work in real life, right? And that's kind of what I'm really trying to do. And the thing that I say is we want to make esports feel like vanilla ice cream that you can add toppings to, right? So when you work with us, we'll give you the boring stuff and we'll do like the base production so well. And you tell us what toppings you want and we'll add on to that. And that really makes sense for a lot more people. And it gives a lot more people opportunities and opportunities to get paid. I got to do a collegiate LAN in California with collegiate casters. My alma mater was there. That was super cool. And just making sure that these opportunities continue to come for the company, but also for the people is what I feel like I'm best prepared for and what my goals are. So going into the business side was pretty dark because it's gross here. There's a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of snake oil in
Oh
esports.
boy.
I was on a panel and they're like, "Why do you handle your own payments yourself? Why don't you pay someone else to do it?" And I was like, "With what money? Who do you think I am?" Like, what do you think we do? And it's like we got to set expectations, and when you set expectations, you set realistic expectations. And when people finally get to see why this is important, it's not, oh, that was really cool, it looked expensive. It's when a parent came to me and said, I've never played Rocket League before, I came to this LAN and I can actually talk to my child, and we play Rocket League every day now, right? And I want that. That's what I'm going for every single day of my life, as opposed to let's see what lasers and dubstep we can get in. You know what I mean? And just kind of changing the course, because I'm not the, people ask me why I'm even in esports. People are like, oh, you're not, the normal type of person that I talk to in esports. And I was like, you can just call me gay. It's cool. But the overarching theme is just like, everyone has to be aware that these things exist. And while they might feel passive to you, they're very active to other people in our industry. And if I wasn't gay, and if I wasn't, half white, and, other than Chris Puckett, I don't feel like there's anyone who actually sounds like me in esports, right? Chris Puckett's an amazing person, another one of my heroes. But, and I want to make sure that Chris Puckett's not the last Chris Puckett.
Mm.
Right. And I want to make sure that, there are other people out there that people can go into, because there are some people with hundreds of thousands of followers, that claim to be esports. And that's what they see. Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that happens a little too often. And I just get really scared of how much talent we lose because the first Google result is something that is bad to see.
Yeah. It's it's a whole, we could have gotten into that as well. That's but it's very beautiful, like, sentiment, right? And I don't mean that as a platitude, but it is. I think that's what makes you probably very different, is that I think you're very, like, energetic about making change. You're, for as far as I know, sticking to your principles, and that you're in a position where you can actually help drive this forward. I think that perfect combination, that's what makes you unique. But, yeah, also coming from a minority background, being gay, being half Asian, yeah, that
Yeah.
gives you a perspective that a lot of people who are entrenched in the industry don't have.
Well, and being gay and being half Asian, I've actually had a really hard time in my life feeling like I belong to any group, right?
Mm.
Because if I was with my Asian friends, I was the white one. If I was with my, white friends, they literally called me Secret Asian Man, which I think is still funny. And, but like back then, it was really bad for my identity, right? I wasn't as confident in myself as before. And it's just like, I think I've been able to code myself and be really good at being like, that's fucked up. Like, this is not cool, right? And I might be a little, it's funny because a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, you're energetic, you're a nice guy, but I'm also pretty confrontational. Like, when something is up,
Mm.
right? I went to a talk once that said all feelings of being uncomfortable are temporary. And so I live like that. And, I'm just going to try to make temporary as short as possible. And I think confronting people for a lot of these things would be it, because again, like, empathy is a big part of solutions. And if we don't come with that empathy, even with some really awful people, like, I get it. I have some family that is, not politically where I stand, right? Yesterday was a hard day for me, for example.
Mm.
And, if any time that, this person, changes and acknowledges, like, something that happens, I'm probably going to talk to them.
Yeah.
Right. And, that empathy is important. People can change, and, and you got to give people a chance. But if you never give them that chance, they're just going to get mad. And so providing those opportunities is so important, because again, even as a kid, I was a preschool teacher for a while. I could tell, like, we would do playground games, for example, and the kids who weren't white would always get picked last. I realized there wasn't a black doll in my classroom. It's not something I thought about, right?
Mm.
I live in Boulder. It's one of the whitest cities in the country. So these are the types of things that I want people to just be aware of. I want people to be able to clock that, hey, there's not, a black doll in this classroom and we have a black student, right? We should
Yeah.
probably fix that, because, they need to see that they're okay and that they're not wrong,
Right.
that their voices aren't shrill. They're talented. They're just being told that, right? Because that's the only feedback people get sometimes, right? And, and what I like to say is my DMs are open, my emails are always open for anyone in the industry that just even wants to talk, because, sometimes that's all you need. I was VOD reviewing someone. Necra, for example, is someone who's like really popping off. And I remember VOD reviewing her really early on, and she was just not that confident,
Mm.
right? And someone being like, "You're good at this," right? Just one person, and then she did another VOD review, and then things have happened, and she's one of the most famous casters out there right now, right? And I again wonder if she didn't have that support of "You're actually good at this" when she first started, what might have happened.
Yeah,
So I'm just going to be that person, right? I'm
that's
going to be real
awesome.
with you. I'm going to be, honest, but I'm also going to help, because if you're not ready now, that doesn't mean you're not going to be ready later, because you can teach skills, you cannot teach passion.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Well, I'd love to continue talking on this conversation. Absolutely. Maybe we'll get a part two soon, sooner rather than later. But yeah,
I love
well,
this stuff.
a little bit over an hour. Yeah, I mean, especially when it's like passionate conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so
I'm not
easy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are afraid to have passionate, impactful conversations, right? It should be hard to talk about these things sometimes. But at the end of the day, it is what our world is. It is real. And you can take, my word for what it's worth. But hopefully from here, someone takes, hey, maybe I can get a job here. Or these two people are obviously on my team. Let me reach out to them and see what I can do. Right. And that's enough. Right. I don't need anything more than that. Um, if it's there, that's cool. That's really good for my ego. But, you know, again, it's just hard conversations should be normalized to have, in my opinion. And things like this are how we do that. So I really appreciate you coming on and engaging with me like that.
I mean, actually, I feel like you've done 90% of the work on this podcast, dude. So, so thank you for coming on. Where is your next gig? Where can people find you? All that good stuff.
I do have some TFT things coming up. I host a game show called First or Eighth every month. I highly recommend that, because I have full reign on what I can do, and I get to do my little. I'm a little bit of a troll on the inside. I'm from the East Coast originally, so my trash talk, I think, is pretty top tier. So I get to kind of just like make fun of my contestants the whole time, and it's super fun. And they're all super smart, and it's a really cool TFT game show with really good creatives behind it. I'll be casting some things in the future. Every Thursday I cast TFT Fight Night Rising, and I also have some Overwatch stuff coming up. There's going to be a blast from the past type of event, and I think I'm going to be casting some goats.
Wow.
I
Oh
casted goats
boy.
for 2 years and then got dropped. Oh man, sometimes you just gotta laugh at that. But yeah, you can find me casting that, and I like tweeting about a lot of stuff. I have 3 really cute dogs, so at Boopasaurus Rex if you want to see. And you're gonna get some politics there, by the way, but just warning you.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really mean it about the part two. I feel like there's so much about like the business side of things that can be explored. It's like
Yeah,
it still feels like it's developing more so than even the casting side is, and the casting
yeah.
side still like in infancy as well. But
Mhm.
especially like businesses and well run businesses, we're not too far away from the years where someone would take the money and run.
Yeah.
So it's all fascinating, but have to be another day. So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you back here for episode 42. I do have to do one more thing that I've forgotten to do. So let me go ahead and pull that up, which is to thank the Patreons. So that's always important. Thank you guys for the Patreon, patreon.com/ZombieGrub, for questions, behind the scenes, all that good stuff, but also for going above and beyond in the support. Thank you guys, Nick, Vinny, Steven, E.T., and Ravi, for doing that. And now I hope to see you guys for episode 42. Bye-bye.